We can kick it off. Hello and welcome everybody to the Impact of AI Explored, where we explore the impact of AI on our everyday use. I'm here with my co-host James. James, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you very much. How are
Enjoyed
you?
your holiday?
We won't talk about that on air.
So if you see him in
No,
real life,
no is the short answer. I'll give you the long version later.
All right, that sounds like a plan. So if you meet him in real life, please ask him about his holiday. And we're joined with our guest this month is Alessandro Perilli. Alessandro, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me today. Appreciate the opportunity. I am the CEO and Chief of Research of a small R&D lab based in London. And we cover all things generative AI, deepfakes, image generation, model fine-tuning or training from scratch for a lot of different use cases for large enterprise customers. This is what I did for the last 1 year and a half. Before that, I was in Red Hat, and I've been there for almost 10 years. And in the last year of those 10, I drove the first big AI project that they ever made, together with the machine learning engineers from IBM Research. So I work with the former CTO of IBM Watson, and that was a great honor. This is, in a nutshell, what I do.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, really interesting. So I've got to ask, what made you decide to go out on your own and kind of set up your own company?
I think that the pace of a large enterprise, no matter how modern and dynamic, is always a little bit too slow to catch the opportunity that comes from big transformational technological waves. And generative AI, to me, is the mother of all waves. I've been through the cloud computing. So I was an analyst in Gartner in the early days of cloud computing. Before that, I was one of the earliest pioneer in the virtualization space. So I code that wave too. So virtualization, cloud computing. Then, of course, in Red Hat, I took a look at, even if it was not my primary job, I took a look at the containerization trend. And then 7 years ago, I started to see the progress that we were making in AI. Initially, I was focused on the computer vision aspect. And then we got the transformative paper, Attention is All You Need, that basically laid the foundation for modern large language models. And I say, this is glorious. This is a really transformational at the level that virtualization was not, at the level that cloud computing was not. And so I need to get into this, and I try to do it with my company, and it was good. We launched a first product, but it was not fast enough, and so I thought better do this by myself at a much smaller scale.
Just to be agile enough to adapt to the market where it's needed.
Well, there is plenty of things. One of them is that still today, 1 year and a half later, after I left, it's still not clear exactly where is the business opportunity. The large majority of people out there are focused on large language models. But it turns out, at least according to my research, that large language model might not be where the big profit opportunity is. It is there for a very small selected group of centralized AI provider and potentially some other players in the market. We can talk about this if you want. But the thing is this. Since I left Red Hat, I started writing a newsletter, a weekly newsletter. And this newsletter is called Synthetic Work. The job of synthetic work is to track how AI is impacting occupation. Jobs, productivity of employees, and overall business operations. So it's not technical. It gets into technical, but it's not technical. It's more about how this is transforming economy, how this is transforming the way companies work. The reason why I did that, I started writing this newsletter, is not just because I genuinely am concerned about what is going to happen to all of us at all across industries at every level of society when generative AI reaches a certain level of maturity, but also because that is a great lens to understand where is the business opportunity. And so after writing 1 year and a half of that, and at the same time researching from a more technical perspective both large language model and diffusion models like Stable Diffusion, Midjourney, all these things, I came to the conclusion that perhaps the money is not where everybody is. It's not in large language model. And maybe there are more opportunities in the short term to work on diffusion models and so on. Now, all of this that I just said would have been really hard to do in a big company like Red Hat, because it's really hard to steer the boat very quickly in one direction or another. And so I perceive that uncertainty, I say, better understand the uncertainty at a smaller scale. That's really it.
No, that makes sense. And maybe just to kind of expand on that, Alessandro, is around what's your view of kind of where we are at from, because what I see is like businesses are like, oh yeah, we have to get in on this AI thing, but at the same time they're like, okay, where is the value to my business? Because there's not going to be, every business is not going to like get huge value out of AI. You'll may get some productivity gains, but real gains is not going to be for every business. And it seems like we're very much at the kind of, people keep going on about, oh, and people kind of go that they're missing the wave, but they're not. And in a previous episode, I don't know if you saw, we had Brian Madden, who you probably know, on, and he was talking about, now is the time to be experimenting, playing around. And actually our last podcast with Mark Kelly, he was saying like, if you even do like 5 minutes a day just to kind of get a feel for it in your field, that you're not missing the wave. You're nowhere near it.
Yeah, and this is part of this is so true. By the way, hi Brian. Brian reads synthetic work in the newsletter.
He did. He actually mentioned you in the podcast episode. So
that's nice. I didn't pay him. I didn't.
We believe you.
I didn't. But this is a great point, and this also explains why I decided to create an R&D lab rather than, my entire life I've been in research, but with the experience I did in Red Hat, I could have created a product, an AI startup. And no, I think that this is the right time to focus on research and development, and the customers that work with me, they want to explore certain edges of AI to understand if there is an edge to be gained, if it's possible to leapfrog competition in some ways. It's too early to just go to, in most cases, it's too early to go to a startup and say, oh, this product is going to work for sure. It's not. Regardless of the hype that we see every day in social media, or how polished the websites look like, or how much money these companies get from venture capital, most of the times they are very brittle solutions that are based on open source or in general open models that I use every day. And you don't get to hear the real limitation of the stuff and the little niche use cases where you can use it. So there is a big discrepancy between what you are led to believe by media and what is, or their marketing departments, and what is the reality of what you can do. But this is also works in the opposite way, which is sometimes these models can do incredible things and nobody's talking about them. And so there is a real opportunity for large enterprise customers to innovate across different industries, but they completely ignore it because they don't understand fully what are the limits and the possibilities of the tech. So R&D in this phase is much better than a fully featured product in an area that might not prove to be profitable in the next 5 years. My opinion.
No, that makes sense, and I think it backs up what we've had. Several of our speakers have said at this stage. It is about R&D, learning, playing around with it at the moment, and then looking at it from your own business and what the benefits are. So we were talking about hype there, and it seems like ChatGPT, Omni, it came out really hyped up, but Claude 3 seems to be the one that's getting a lot of focus at the moment.
Gone.
No, that was. I just want to get your view on. I've seen lots of posts in the last couple of weeks. ChatGPT has kind of died down a bit, and Claude 3 has really kind of come to the forefront. But again, that could just be hype and media. I'm just wondering, in terms of the models, where you see them differentiating?
So when we look at these large language models, we always need to differentiate the conversation depending on the use case, because they behave very differently for each use case depending on how they've been trained and the kind of system prompt and other guardrails and scaffolding that each centralized AI provider has put around the model. So a model that is optimized or has been a little bit improved or fine-tuned to do coding, to assist a software developer in writing coding, does not necessarily do the best possible job in helping lawyers in a law firm, which is one of the top use cases that we see today. I hear a lot and read about a lot of supposedly experts in AI, even people that are high profile, very visible, that didn't not collect all the data I collected in the last year and a half. And so they don't have a clear understanding of what are the use cases, which one are working, what use cases have been abandoned, for what reasons. And instead I have this database that is part of synthetic work where I track all the big companies in the world, what they're doing, what they're not doing. So Claude, to go back to your point, with the latest version, Sonnet, Claude3 Sonnet, has demonstrated a little bit of an edge for the coding part. I'm not a professional software developer, so my experience is limited. But even in my limited experience, I could notice the difference. Now, there is something that must be said, though. There are two things that must be said, though. The first one is that when there is this all of a sudden jump between one model or the other, is not necessarily because the newcomer that the leapfrog ahead is really better. It might be because the previous leader, so in this case GTP4o, has been modified in such a way, has been constrained in such a way for a number of reasons by the centralized AI provider, OpenAI in this case, such that its performance degrades. There are plenty of reasons for that. So sometimes the company might try to save computational cycles, so asks the model through a system prompt, what OpenAI calls custom instructions, asks to provide more fastest response, more synthesized responses, and that has unintended consequences. People perceive that a too short of an answer is kind of not really knowing your stuff. Or there are other situations where you do some tweaks that we will never see in the scaffolding that tries to maintain security and protect the sandbox where this model is running. And those changes have unintended consequences in terms of the whole behavior of the model that gets understood weeks or even months later, and you don't really know what exactly is that has caused this thing. And then the third potential reason is that there are bugs. People are completely forgotten with the large language model that we have bugs, that we create bugs. And so sometimes we do mistakes. And so we may introduce, OpenAI might introduce a mistake, a bug that is hard to debug, is hard to fix, is hard to revert to. And when you pull in one direction, you're not really sure what's happening in the other. So there are all these things that might be happening such that the models, who has the top might end up being lower rather than the newcomer becomes better. This is one thing to be said. And then if I can, there is one additional element I want to say about Claude that is really important, and it's this. Even if Claude is better at coding or other use cases, to me personally, it's still completely unusable or mostly unusable by large enterprises. And why is that? Because Anthropic has made a point in adding a level of ethical guidelines, a behavior that is perceived or is framed to us as less reckless than OpenAI. And these ethical guardrails that they put in force the model to refuse to answer to even the simplest question, to the most innocuous question. So sometimes you're asking something to learn about a topic, and the Claude3 tells you, I cannot really answer this question because you might use that information to damage the company we're talking about, and so I'm not going to give you the answer. And that
so
is
they tuned it. They really tightened the guardrails for the fairness and inclusiveness.
right. And so we can debate as long as you want. I have a very strong opinion on this, of what is the role of a centralized AI, if he has the right or not to apply certain moral, ethical directions to the model. But even if we don't talk about that, even if we just talk about the implementation, a large enterprise needs reliability, needs a software that can reliably answer the question. Now, large language models are non-deterministic systems, which means that they always tweak a little bit of the answer, and that's okay. But here we're talking about a model that one day can answer your question and another day can say, sorry, I don't trust you anymore, dear user, so I'm not going to answer. And that's really not the basis for an enterprise usage. So that leaves me quite perplexed about how Anthropic is addressing the whole thing.
Yeah, how they're playing their AI game.
That's interesting. That's as you said, it brings up an interesting point about the centralized AI operator, about the restrictions they put on their models, and the impact that has. And you said, you know, if you can't get information about, say, a competitor or something like that when you're a large enterprise, then you go back to your more traditional methods. So yeah, I can see. I think it is one of the limitations of most of the models, is that they do have constraints, obviously.
Yeah, and what's your idea? Should it be more centralized because you said I have a very strong opinion on it. Should it be more centralized, arranged by the one that's deploying or maintaining the model, or should it be more based on the one that's using the model or the enterprise that's using the model?
So I'm going to upset a lot of people here probably, but I'm going to say it anyway. The fact that a model forces on me a certain ethical guideline has huge implications. The first one is that if the model refuses to answer on the basis that the information might be dangerous, this is a slippery slope, because what is the information that is dangerous? Today is, please don't tell the user how to make a bomb with chemical stuff that you find at the supermarket, which sounds like okay-ish. But then tomorrow, the centralized AI provider, and I'm not singling out Anthropic, it could be anyone, right? It could be Meta, it could be Microsoft, it could be OpenAI, it could be anybody. Then might change their stance and say, well, okay, maybe we don't talk about this other topic either, because they might offend somebody, like political party. Or it might be used in certain governments that are not as where the freedom is not that high priority. I'm not necessarily talking about China or North Korea or Russia. I'm talking about those middle grounds where, like India, for example, where the government might try to apply pressure on a centralized AI provider and say, yeah, there is this other topic that we think could be dangerous for our culture and the way people do it, behave. And so at what point the centralized AI provider is able to say this yes and this no? Where is the line? And should really be the ultimate decider, the rulers of where the line goes. I don't think it's their role. And I don't think that I, as a user of a large language model, want to hear an ethical lesson from an AI model. So this is the first problem. And then there is another one, which is kind of smaller compared to this, but that's the one that drives me insane, the one that really frustrates me. So every time there is a large language model, this is an example. Every time there is a large language model that comes out, I always do a test that seems silly, but it's not silly. I always ask as a prompt, how do I get rich quickly?
Writing that one down. Yeah.
and that apparently simple prompt is designed to understand if a large language model can provide factual information, can apply or not apply ethical judgment, can control, sorry for the noise, can control a lot of different aspects of what is being told to you. And every single time, in most cases, but with Claude is especially bad, models don't tell you all the aspects that all the way you could get rich quickly. They do two things. One, they tell you that there is no way to get rich quickly. You need to work really hard and save money and work your entire life. Wealth cannot be gained in minutes. Don't do that. So they try to discourage you. This is a problem because you are prevented, you're not given information, you're blocked for information. So you don't know if there is a method. You have no idea. So this is a form of censorship. And then the second problem is that by saying that there are no ways, the model is making an assumption that I want to do something illegal. So it's expressing indirectly a judgment of my intention. I'm paying the user of it. And I'm being told, no, you probably want to do something illicit. So I'm not going to tell you about, in this particular case, I'm not going to tell you about, I don't know, option trading or lottery tickets or other things like that. And that's not the right way, in my opinion. The right way is I'm giving you all the information you're looking for. And then I'm telling you, this is illegal. This has very low chances of success. This will probably bankrupt you because I know that people go bankrupt. And then you decide, like an adult, like every other adult in the world, decides what to do with the information I'm providing. That seems more fairer approach to information sharing.
So it feels a bit like a censored Google or a censored Bing search or whatever. It's more centralized and more tailored to only telling you the right thing.
The thing is that all these companies are really treading dangerous waters. Their first priority, because we don't know anything about the copyright implication of image generation, so the diffusion models, we will have to escalate all the way to the Supreme Courts across all the countries in the world to have the final decision, final saying about this. They don't know about what is legit or not legit, if they will be held accountable for information that they share with the user so easily. So their priority right now is risk mitigation, is limit the legal liability. And who cares about the user? Who cares if the user cannot know how to get rich quickly? Sue me. It's better than being sued for telling you that you can win lottery ticket. The person has bought all his money spent on lottery tickets. He failed, and then he decided to suicide, and the family drags you in a lawsuit. It's better, no? So that's probably their position at the moment. But that makes it harder for me to use a large language model like Claude that is so strong in expressing this ethical guidelines. I don't want to use it.
So do you think that that's why there are quite a lot of offline local models that you can use that don't have those kind of really tight guardrails within them?
The problem is that even those have it. So, for example, if you take a Llama 3, which is a state-of-the-art model for let's call open, it's not open source at all. Let's call it open in the sense that you can see but you cannot touch, and you can download it locally and you can use it locally. Even there are guardrails, and those guardrails are baked in during the training phase of the model or the fine-tuning later, the reinforcement learning from human feedback. And that's exact. So there is no way to circumvent that unless you find a particular prompt that can jailbreak the model. And so you kind of revert the model to a more, let's call it, primitive state. And in that primitive step, you have a model that is less tolerant in having a civilized conversation with you, but at the same time doesn't have all these inhibitions that are artificially implemented into the system. It's really hard to jailbreak the models to get that deep into the model capabilities, though, and it's certainly not something that the average enterprise or the average user will want to do. That's not the normal behavior. So I cannot say, oh yeah, don't worry, download Llama 3 and then jailbreak, you will be fine. It should not happen in the first place. It's my opinion.
Sure. No, that makes sense, and interesting to hear about the constraints that the various different models have. One of the reasons I reached out to you, if you remember way back, Alessandro, is I put a comment about how I've been like trying to generate images and text on images. And I actually I was at a Microsoft event and I saw a company use an image, and I spotted about 3 or more spelling mistakes in the image they displayed on screen. And I actually used that in my LinkedIn post. And I'm like, how are we using this in a professional nature if the text looks like something my 6-year-old wrote? I know there's a technical explanation, and I actually want you to go into it, but I'm just like, they're talking about, I basically, if I get something with text generated, I then send it to our internal graphic designer and get him to redo the text for me because I can't get it to work properly. Yeah. Now, I know you said there is one, you can talk about yourself, one of the models that has kind of taken this on board and is now getting better at it. So, but like if I'm talking about, Microsoft Designer or ChatGPT, it's woeful. I tried to do it yesterday and I just got absolute nonsense.
So it just like hands and mouth and feet, the font, the text in images is a really hard problem for diffusion models in the way the architecture works today. They don't really have an understanding of what a font is. And by font, I mean the whole font family. So the body of each one of the single letters. And so it's really hard for them to render a text in the way you want. Part of the reason, I don't want to go too technical because it will get boring probably, but one of the reasons is that, as simple as it sounds, the training was not focused. The training of the first generation of models was not really focused on typography. It was focused on images of beautiful women, which is the only thing that this model seems to be really good at for the most part. And that tells you the kind of motivation that drove
of the programmers. And
yeah. So they do other things well, but nothing is as amazing as the portrait or half-past portrait of a woman, a cat, a dog, and very few other things, because the training was focused a lot on those elements. Now, there is a model there are multiple models actually that have emerged in the last 3 months that have been go through a much more intensive training focused on typography. And so one of them is Stable Diffusion 3 Medium, the first one of the Stable Diffusion 3 family that was released by Stability AI. And this model is, compared to the horrors we've seen so far that you're describing, it's amazing in generating text. Not only gets the word right, but it also can render the font in a material or with a perspective, depending on where you want to place it in the image, that is somewhat coherent and realistic compared to the content of the image. But even then, when you try to deviate a little bit from the main categories of images that these models are trying to generate, you start to see again words that have a double letter.
Yeah.
where it shouldn't happen. They're much better. The word is much more defined compared to the early models like Stable Diffusion 1.5 or 2 or SDXL. But there still is no flawless approach yet. There are other models not made by Stability AI that are getting really good at generating text in context of an image. But again, they suffer pretty much the same problem. And that will go away either by changing the architecture that we're using, evolving the architecture of the diffusion model, or by doing a mass training like has not been done yet at this point. And there is no way around that. So exactly as you said, you generate the image, he places the font in it, probably where you want it, but then you need to send to a professional graphic designer to do the due correction. And most of the time, that guy spends less time redoing it rather than trying to fix.
No, he does. He just redoes it. That's how I've done it.
So for now, my recommendation is don't use for text yet. It's not reliable. Avoid the text part.
That's fair enough. Okay, but thank you for the explanation. It's good to get it because it was frustrating me. I tried about 15 different prompts to try and refine the text, and it actually was getting worse. Yeah. And I was just like, I can't use that.
Yeah, and it's the same when we decided the logo, James. Remember when we you sent in the first one and it was just it wasn't correct, and we had to redo it in the end by hand.
Exactly.
But it gave us a good starting point. So that's the good part.
If you're using this thing for prototyping to have a sense of how things will look like, then who cares if it's not perfect? For example, one problem that is as old as the world is the interaction between a business user and a graphic designer, because the user never quite is able to describe what they want. And now with these tools, they kind of sort, if they have the time to create a prototype to show to the designer or something like this. So the interaction is a little bit better. But more than that, this is not production ready. And this is also the reason why, if this is interesting to you, we have not seen yet models or applications that use certain models that are capable of generating entire PowerPoint presentations or generate text documents in the sense of with particular calligraphy or font, a full Word document or PDFs, for example, which was the holy grail of the business use cases, right, in the office space. Oh my gosh, this thing is going to start from a prompt that I write or even a piece of text I already have, and it's going to give me the full business presentation done in minutes. And you see some startups that are doing that, but it's not quite at the level that our imagination has led us to.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah, I use the Microsoft Copilot stuff a lot, and it's true. You say if you have a Word document, you create a presentation from it, it will do some kind of recap of the Word document in the PowerPoint, but there will be a lot of text.
Yeah.
While we work in bullet points with 1 or 2 words, it's just a lot of text.
There is also another element to that has nothing to do with font rendering and all the other things, and that's, I hope nobody from Microsoft is listening to this and taking offense, but the way these startups or even Microsoft or Google, the way they are tackling the problem is, in my humble opinion, completely wrong. What do I mean by that? There is no real value in having a large language model plus a diffusion model, what we call sometimes multimodal model, in doing a PowerPoint presentation for you if the outcome is as crap as the one that a human being does. Nothing has changed. You just save 5 minutes or an hour or 2 hours in generating the same crap. And so your incentive is placed in the wrong position. What is the position? The position is saving time. And it should not be there. The incentive should be in creating a compelling presentation that passes the message, that share an idea from one brain to another and so the idea spreads. So in other words, the effectiveness of the presentation.
And the quality.
Yeah, but quality, when we say quality, what we really mean is, can I create a presentation like the TED ones and the TED Talk? And why they are perceived as high quality? Because they spread an idea in 15 minutes, and that idea can be passed from one person to another. It's not about saving time. In fact, I don't know how many people know this, but a TED Talk takes almost 1 year to be prepared. When you are selected as a speaker by TED, I participated in one of the TED conferences, not as a speaker. I was part of the audience, and I read the book from the founder of TED, so I know a little bit about this. But when you're selected as a TED speaker, unless you already are super famous, like a Nobel Prize and so forth, they pair you with a professional, world-class professional presentation, narrative designer, writer. And this person works with you for months and months and months in removing every bit of unnecessary component from your narrative down to 15 minutes. And that it takes months of work, months. So wow. It is 50 minutes of TED means 9 months of work. It's like giving birth to a baby. And it works so well because there is that massive effort behind it. And that's where AI could make the difference.
I was about to say, yes, that should be in getting that succinct messaging. That should be it, not just putting together throwing together a presentation. Like, I've used, if you even use like Designer in PowerPoint, it gives you the designs are rubbish. They're unusable. I wouldn't actually use any of them. But as you said, that whole thing about what we want is clear messaging and to share an idea.
Yeah.
And if you could work with an AI instead of and hone that messaging to be that succinct, that would be amazing.
That's exactly right. So one of the things I always said, so in the last year and a half, is that whoever is working on AI for presentations, doesn't matter if it's Microsoft or a startup, doesn't matter, should not try to go for the low-hanging fruit or just turning crap into the same crap but faster, which is what everybody's doing. But they should try to apply film-making, storytelling, so that your presentation is like a short film. You are familiar with the concept of short films, right? From 3 minutes to 15 minutes in length. They can be really impactful. You can remember for many years. They're work of art, beautiful things. Now, it's impossible for a human being to dedicate, one that is an ordinary business user in a large company, to dedicate that kind of effort to it. Even if you had the skills, and most of us don't, you don't have 9 months or 1 year or 2 years to put together a short film. The production time is too gigantic. But then now you have AI that can do all of these things in seconds. And so the real game changer is, I take whatever Word document you have, and rather than transform it in a series of slides with bullet points, like the crap that humans do today, I turn it into a 3 minutes, not even one, it can be even a 30-second commercial. I would be up for it. I think it would be very effective. He can turn it into a 30-second commercial, 3 minutes short film that conveys the point using all the master filmmakers that we know, because we teach them in schools to film students. So we know narrative mechanisms. We know how to press the right buttons with people. And so the AI has all of this information encoded already in the large language model, could use that information to say, let me turn this into a narrative that people will actually remember, rather than the stupid bullet points that nobody cares about.
And in your opinion, with the current models, if prompted correctly, could the current large language models deliver this?
So, good question. And the answer is, I already tried and I make great progress. So part of the things that I did in the first 9 months, 1 year of synthetic work with the newsletter I mentioned before that I wrote for 1 year and a half so far. So the first year was to try to get the readers more familiar with prompting technique, which is very unnatural, it's complicated to do. People don't want to do it. And we can talk about the reasons why as long as you want. But the point is that without those prompting techniques, you get very little out of the models compared to what you could get. And so one of the things that I try to do to help people understand better these prompting techniques is taking a real world use case and show how a certain prompt could be shaped, crafted, if you want, to achieve that use case, to enable that use case. And one of the most, popular examples that I offered was how to create. I created a custom GPT with OpenAI that used my custom prompt to create this presentation assistant. And the presentation assistant does not do what these AI startups do. In fact, it's not capable because it's too limited in how it can manipulate the graphic. But it will take whatever is the message that you want to deliver. So first of all, it will ask you questions completely autonomously about what is the audience, what you're trying to say, why you're trying to say. So trying to not put everything on you, but try to help you extract what really matters in the message that you want to convey. So after he asks you a million of questions about what he needs to create the presentation, then he applies a series of very well-known narrative styles like the hero journey and other things that you will find in books that are about how to write stories, or how to write a film script and so on, and applies all these techniques to whatever you have fed the model with in your prompt plus your follow-up answers, and then it will come up with an entire narrative. It will tell you, well, now we will create 9 slides where we will tell the story in this way. In the first slide, we will talk about this. In the second slide, we will talk about this. In the third slide, we will talk about this. And this will be the first section, and then the middle section, and then the end section. And then after he does all of this, so he creates the narrative arc for you, he will suggest what is the best image that goes in each slide to convey the idea behind the narrative arc. And there is no flipping bullet point. There is nothing like that. And the goal is not just to do the presentation, but to teach you as an end user how to rethink the way you do the presentations so that it actually passes a message to other people. That's the value of this tool.
That
Wow.
that sounds amazing, to be honest. Yeah.
I want
I'm
that.
super. Yeah, I definitely want that. So that would have a huge impact on what I do, seeing as I work in product marketing.
I'll send the prompt, no problem.
Appreciate that. Okay. So, Gurjan, anything else we want to talk to Alessandro?
Yeah, one of the things, Alessandro, and you also have a lot of stuff about the state of deepfake on your website. And I was really we were talking about this in an earlier podcast. How in India they were sending hyper personalized messages to users to vote for the current president, and how they could do that in a massive scale by just using a little bit of prompting to automate a lot of building. And I was wondering your take on the state of deepfake and where it will take us.
So deepfake is one of the main things that I do with my RD lab. We don't talk about what we do. We don't talk about the customers that we have in that area because, as you can imagine, there is high confidentiality attached to this kind of specific jobs. But I can talk about the state of deepfake. So first of all, when we talk about deepfake, we're really talking about mainly 2 things. One is the face swapping, so or the body swapping in some cases, and the other one is the voice, so how your voice sounds, right? You can do one or the other, or both of them at the same time, and basically replace any human being in any context, in any picture or video footage. And these 2 things develop in completely divergent ways, that they're not they are not aligned in any way. So sound-wise, synthetic voices-wise, the state of the art is something that I showed 1.5 years ago, as soon as I left Red Hat, in a little 3 minutes video that is on my YouTube channel called Fake Show. And Fake Show was the promo, the fictitious promo for a Muppet Show style kind of show that talks about all the horrible things that enterprise employees working in tech vendors do to their customers. I thought it would be really funny, and it was quite
True.
and, 100% true, guaranteed, 100% true, and quite fresh in my memory, considering my past career. And so I thought it was very fun to use as a subject for let's call it a demo. And the quality of the voices that I use and the range of emotions that I show in those 3 minutes remain unmatched until May of this year, March or May, I don't remember, of this year. So we made massive progress in terms of how realistic the synthetic voices sound compared to a human being. But one key problem that we still have today is that they're flat in terms of emotion and intonation. So they kind of sound a little bit emotional occasionally, but almost flat. Instead, if you have the patience to watch that Fake Show video for the entire 3 minutes, you see a wide range of emotions that really sound like human beings. In fact, it sounds like I'm using 2 real actors to do that. And that remain unchallenged as an approach. I didn't develop that. I just show how the technology works. Remain unchallenged until May of this year. In May, I think it's May, I don't remember. In May, OpenAI showed the demo of GTP4o, the latest model. And in the demo, they showed a real-time voice. And the real-time voice sounds absolutely incredibly identical to the voice of Scarlett Johansson in the movie Hair, which is a beautiful movie everybody should watch.
Yep.
It's a cautionary tale. And if you hear the gamma of emotions in that is phenomenal. So at this point, for most part, at least for English language, the synthetic voice deepfake is problem solved. When you go to Italian or Dutch or Spanish or other languages, you can tell that there is still work to do to make it really, really realistic. But if you just heard it with English and you are astonished by that, there is no reason to not believe that in 6 months, 1 year maximum, we will get to the same level for every language on the planet. It's just a matter of collecting data and do the training. So that problem is solved or mostly solved. The face swapping is a harder problem. And we are making lots of progress, but we're not quite at the same level of maturity. So with deepfake for faces, right, face swapping, there are fundamentally 3 big problems. The first problem is that you need to have the face at the right resolution to match the rest of the video or the image, which is non-trivial, and I'll explain why in a second. Then you need to have the face in the right orientation, because the model needs to recreate the orientation of your face without knowing how you look on the side. He has no idea about your ears, doesn't know anything. And then there are other elements like, for example, if the face is partially obstructed, okay? So if there is an obstruction in a scene, can you really reconstruct, swap the face despite the obstruction? So there's 3 big problems. The first problem, the resolution, is the most immediate, the most urgent, as you can imagine. Yeah. And this problem has not been solved yet completely. Until 3 months ago, the entire industry could count only on one model to do this job, which is called InSwapper. And InSwapper is an amazing model, but the creator of InSwapper only released a 128 pixel resolution. He refused to release a higher resolution, which he or she or they created, because he didn't want to enable criminal activities or child pornography or other things like that. So he said, I'm realizing what I'm creating is too dangerous. You get the low resolution version, and that's it. I don't want to be involved. However, there was always an opportunity for something. He or she or they was open to releasing a commercial version of this to certain entities. And rumors say that the only company in the world that got this model, of at least the only information we know, is Midjourney. So apparently Midjourney has a higher version of this. For the rest of us, there was only the 128 pixel version of it. And that version could not, was not good enough to put your face in a modern movie or modern camera footage. But 3 months ago, somebody invented a mechanism using sub-pixeling and subsampling to actually increase a little bit the resolution from 128 to 512. And so now the state of the art for open models is 512 pixel in terms of face swapped resolution. And that's where we are at. It's not yet viable to swap a face in a 4K movie unless the person you need to swap is really small in the scene. Yeah. But it's much more workable right now, and so we're slowly going in the state of the art in a mature stage for this models.
Just in terms of deepfakes, Alessandro, if you've got we've got all this technology and it's going to get better and better, how will we detect whether it's real or a deep fake? Is there mechanisms for doing that, or is it just going to have to be a judgment call, or we have so much misinformation out there, so this is obviously going to make things a lot worse.
That's true. And one of the main reasons why I was talking in a public way about deepfakes is that, I don't know if you know, but 2024 is the year of our history, modern history, where we will have most election in the world than ever before. And so the risk of disinformation, especially in those countries that have less stringent control and less scrutiny on what goes in the press, it's severe. Recognition, identification, flagging of deepfake is one of the things that we do in the lab. Again, we don't talk about this, but it's one of the things that can be done. The problem is that, and I have no problems admitting it, is that the technology is still prone to a lot of false negatives and false positives. And every startup out there that is doing this in a more commercial way will have to admit that. It's not just with deepfake recognition, but also in the text. That when you are passing a text as original and instead has been generated by LLMs, is the same thing. There is no certain way to recognize something that has been forged with AI, and there is often the risk that something that is not forged, that is original, actually is flagged as forged. So at some point in time, at least for now, until technology improves, you still have to resort to traditional forensic analysis techniques and inspect the image really, really closely, and then understand a bunch of things about the characteristic of the face or the characteristic of the whole scene. And sometimes the image is so perfect that you really need to look for things that are the opposite of a mistake, when there is too much symmetry or there are certain positions of the elements on the face and so forth. And then you do also mathematical analysis of the image and other things, but it's still very uncertain. This is still very early days.
Yeah. Like I saw an example now. Now I knew it was a fake straight away, but it was Gareth Southgate giving his press conference, and they'd used AI to change what he said, and it was really funny. But it looked quite realistic. Now I obviously knew it wasn't, but at the same time, it could be perceived. So it is.
If you're in a pub if you're in a pub
Yeah,
on a
yeah. If
phone.
you're in a pub and you just look at your phone on Twitter and you see this thing, it's like, oh my God, Southgate just said, well, he didn't, because, it's absolute nonsense. But, so yeah, I can see that it's there's funny use cases like that. Like you can as we've talked about elections, you're talking about deep fakes, but there's a whole thing around satire you could utilize deep fakes for. So there is, I don't think there are parts of deep fakes which are scary, but there's also parts which, it's like anything we've ever done. We utilize different methods for satire, and this can be one of those angles for satire. So yeah, I think there are, like anything, there's pros and cons to any kind of technology. This has been, for me personally, an amazing conversation. So thank you very much. I've learned a lot in this past hour. I hope everyone watching has. I would love to do a follow-up in the future, and we can see where we're at, because the pace of change with this stuff is quite incredible. We will obviously in the show notes put links to your website and your newsletter if people are interested, and I definitely think they will. And we'll obviously do to the YouTube video. I'm going to go and watch that one myself. So thanks everyone for watching, listening. This has been the Impact of AI Explored. Thanks very much.
See you next time. Bye-bye.